ahead. I just, you know, I want to thank you all because I know that these are rather interesting times for all of us, and I appreciate you committing a little time to visit with us today and, you know, develop these programs that we're starting to try to put together so that we can help educate staff. You know, even though we're not necessarily out pounding the pavement, we can help as best we can, you know, with some educational stuff. So this will be the first one that we're going to do this way. I think it should work. We've got Kathy Lishak here, who's the Director of Marketing for Dreyfus, and then Bob Verdun, who works with Kathy, and Bob kind of keeps us from crashing the computers on a daily basis. You have Adam Fry up in Colorado, and Adam is the brand manager, you know, program manager for Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. You all, I think everybody probably has met Aaron from Domaine Drouhin, Oregon. Aaron's the cellar master. We've got Joe Signorelli, who is the California State Manager, located in Southern California. We've got Mindy from, excuse me, from Young's Market in Arizona. Mindy's VP of Estates Group, if I remember correctly, title-wise. And then and there's Mr. Kaufman. And Robert is the VP of Brand Portfolio Management at Winebow in Seattle. And Ryan Bauer, who is the brand manager and program developer down in Oregon for Young's Market. Chris Giordano, who's the head of well, he reports to one of our good friends, Mr. Rankin, but he runs the fine wine team for Wine Warehouse. John Caruso, who's the president of Dreyfus. Grant Curlow, who is the Pacific Northwest Regional Manager. And then Deborah DeFarcy, who's in charge of retail in Southern California for Wine Warehouse. And John, you're still muted in case it matters. So's Ryan, so's Joe, so's Mindy. But anyway, so
you were on such a roll, Mike. I just let you go.
Okay. Well, you know, I never have anything to say, so you know, I could just sit here and be alone. Anyway, just, you know, very quickly, we're going to go through this, and we'll try to keep it, you know, to 30, 40 minutes tops. I think that, you know, my experience is that most, you know, wine salespeople's attention span is somewhere in that neighborhood, and then we kind of fade off into la la land. So anyway, I'm going to let Aaron do a brief introduction, and then we're going to do a series of questions and answers, and we'll have some fun. So Aaron, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to do this. I know it's for all of us crazy time, but helping however I can. We all are. Ashley is, I am, David is. So I'm glad to be part of it. Just a little introduction to myself. Arron Bell is my name. I grew up in Oregon, was born in California, but grew up in Oregon, attended the University of Oregon. I've worked for the Drouhin family since 2002. I've had many different roles. When I first started in 2002, there was 3 employees. And so I kind of helped in the cellar. I helped with some direct sales. And obviously through the years, my role and my title have changed. I've been the assistant winemaker since 2006. I was very consistent. I'm in charge of the day-to-day winemaking, so I take care of all her babies while she's away, of course answering to her, but I am here day-to-day to act in aspect her hands in Oregon. So glad to be part of this. As you guys know, I mean, I feel like I don't need to tell too much of the backstory, but I guess I will a little. The Oregon Winery of Maison Joseph Drouhin in Burgundy. This is going to be our 33rd vintage here. First vintage was 1988. We have 2 properties now in Oregon. Where I'm sitting is the Dundee Hills Estate. You can see the winery in the background. Gravity Flow Winery, finished in time for the 1989 harvest. So we have this in the Dundee Hills. It's about 225 acres, and then we have about 130 acres planted to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, mostly Pinot, about 12.5 acres of Chardonnay, and the remainder would be Pinot Noir in different blocks. New to us, in 2013, we purchased Roserock Vineyard in the Eola-Amilty Hills, so 24 miles directly south of where I'm sitting in the Eola-Amilty Hills, southern Eola-Amilty Hills. A similar property, a little bit bigger in size, about 280 acres, but ironically about the same planted, about 130 acres planted. Again, ironically, one of the reasons we wanted it, it's planted to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay exclusively. So I think that's probably a good little intro. And I know that you guys have some questions, so I would love to try to answer them. And if not, I'll just make something up.
Okay, well, let Adam, why don't you start and present the first question, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Hey, Aaron, good to see you.
Hey, Adam.
You were saying that you're the hands for Veronique in Oregon. What does it mean to you to work with Veronique to kind of get her vision and expression into the wines?
I had no other experience in winemaking until this opportunity. I have a degree in philosophy from the University of Oregon, so which is perfect for winemaking, I guess. But I loved the wines before. I actually worked in restaurants before putting my way through college, and I worked in restaurants and fell in love with Drouhin wines. When I was living in Arizona, I lived in Scottsdale, and I fell in love with the wine. 1996, our Dundee Hills Pinot Noir in a blind tasting with a bunch of other servers at about midnight after working at Morton's of Chicago, a steakhouse in northern Scottsdale. Anyways, fast forward to, I always loved the wines. So I feel like I got a little kiss on the forehead from Bacchus of having the opportunity to work hand in hand with Veronique Drouhin, with any winery that you love, to be able to go and be part of that. I feel very, very special to that. Over the course of a year, this is going to be my 19th vintage here. So I've done almost 60% of the vintages of Domaine Drouhin Oregon. We've become friends too. So my philosophy, ironically my philosophy is her philosophy, but I mean that in the utmost respect. I really believe in the wines that she makes and that I get to help participate in making as well.
Thanks, Adam. Robert, you want to go next?
Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
Good, thanks. Hey, this might be more of a topical question, but, we're going into the pre-sale of our Roserock Zephrine, and maybe you could just touch base on kind of what you see stylistically are the differences between the Zephrine and the Lorraine, and just what you're trying to accomplish in each of these different programs. Thanks.
Well, the program is kind of the same, and if I fall out, I'm balancing myself on a rock, by the way, to keep myself level. So if you see me all of a sudden go, it's because the rock gave way. The Lorraine and Zephrine are the same idea. It's a barrel selection from the property, whether it's Roserock or the Dundee Hills property, and it really is a barrel selection of what we thought the best potential wine that could be made from that property is. You can say that we've furthered that, in the Dundee Hills, we have more experience with it, and we've furthered that process by now splitting hair again by creating the Cuvée Louise, which is a barrel selection from the Lorraine. I would imagine in due time, we will also take that approach at the Roserock property. The difference between the wines is place. Really, it's place. The expression of the Eola-Amilty Hills property tends to be more dark fruited, much more floral in characteristic. And a touch more spicy. And that's funny to say because also the Dundee Hills can be quite spicy: white pepper, cardamom, clove. But the philosophy and the approach is exactly the same. We taste every month, both properties, every lot, 100% composite, and we, starting in October, after we've made the wines in a given vintage, we taste every month, and we start to kind of get an idea, personality-wise, of what those wines are wanting to be as they progress, as they gain, some barrel flattery, as they go through malolactic. And we've just kind of had to make our big decisions in the last 3 weeks on what is, at least to the 80th percentile, what is going to be the Zephrine Cuvée, the Roserock Pinot Noir, the Dundee Hills, the Lorraine. So we've just started to do that. But I don't know if that's kind of a generic answer, but the approach is the same. It's just kind of what we feel is the best expression. We have more historical reference here on the property because we've made wines from it 32, going to be 33 times.
Right.
Well, we're still trying to do that at Roserock. So the Roserock is much more variable where it's coming from as we get to know the property more. But I would say as we do get to know it, we are starting to find, even, we have this will be our 7th vintage of making wine from it. We're starting to find a couple blocks that are now consistently showing their pedigree, or where they want to end up as in the blends. We're still doing it blind, so we're still not trusting that, which we do at DDO as well. But historically, some of the blocks that go into Lorraine or Louise here are year in and year out for the last 15 years, for example, have gone into Lorraine or Louise.
Have you had any surprises from fruit coming from different places that have made it actually into the Lorraine and
yes.
to the Zephrine?
Yeah, it still happens. So that's why it's still blind. Because, because once and you have there's a block that Veronique likes very much from 2002 on the property, and there's one that I like, 96. And so when you start to like them year in and year out, you start to have a little bias to them. So you still have to do it blind, so you don't have that bias when you're doing it. So yeah, there's a couple blocks that still go into Lorraine that surprise us. Some of the property when you first the blocks when you first come into the property at DDO, what we call set 1, 2, 3, and 4. Some years they're the best of the Classique, and some years they're just genuinely Lorraine. But again, doing that blind, it just keeps everyone honest.
Nice, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mindy, why don't you go next?
Hi, Aaron. How are you?
Hi, Mindy. How are you? Good to see you.
Great. It's good to see you too. So mine is sort of a two-part question about Chardonnay. And it's my understanding that initially in Oregon, Chardonnay wasn't very good. I do understand the clones have changed, but I'd like to know what you've seen in terms of the changes, not only in clonal selection, but in the vineyards. And then also if you could compare Oregon Chardonnay with maybe California Chardonnay.
Okay, first part. What has changed? You hit on the nose. The clones were the wrong clones. We were trying to ripen California clone Chardonnay in Oregon, and it just wasn't. It had not mutated and was not able to ripen. There were some vintages that it could, and it could be very good, but that was probably 3 of 10. And then the Dijon clones were introduced that are smaller clusters size and also ripened earlier, and that was really kind of the beginning key to success. I think why we're seeing a resurgence in Oregon Chardonnay now is that you have really 3 things. You have the right clone, obviously, that's going back nearly 23 years, 24 years. You have older vines, which obviously is quite important. I mean, our vines still, our oldest Chardonnay vines on the property now were planted in 1994. So they're still, in the scheme of things, not that old, but we do have more mature vines that are kind of wanting to show you quality-wise what they want to be when they grow up a bit. And the last thing, I think there's a comfort level in Oregon of we've found a style of Chardonnay, whether it's us or Bergstrom or a style of Chardonnay in Oregon, or Irie for that matter, of Chardonnay that we're comfortable making that is Oregon style. We're no longer trying to replicate what California was doing or what Burgundy was doing. I mean, obviously for us, that's a touchy subject because we are Burgundy. So, but we are, when Vinny comes here, it is, she comes to Oregon to make Oregon wine. Maybe the reference point often is Burgundy, but it is to make Oregon wine, whether it's Chardonnay or Pinot. Stylistically, in comparison to California, I mean, ultimately we're a cooler region. We're a region 5 as far as growing degree days, and so we're much cooler, and so we have much better acid. I don't think we gain the body as well as California. And I personally like California Chardonnay, so I feel like sometimes I'm walking on eggshells to always feel like I'm skirting around and I'm beating up on California Chardonnay because I'm not trying to. I think they're delicious Chardonnay, stylistically just much different. I like a more fresh style of Chardonnay, and so I think that's what Oregon gives you. I think we're learning to build texture and richness with the vines being a little older, but I think that our acid profile in Chardonnay in general in Oregon is quite refreshing. And as the American palate seems to want more fresh, more acid-driven wines, I think that's also gone hand in hand with why kind of the Oregon Chardonnay is really taken off.
Okay.
Great,
Thanks,
thank you.
Ryan, why don't you go next?
Good. I had a question about the clones too. I was kind of curious about how the clonal variation is different between the Eola site and the Dundee Hills site. Specifically, the differences in soil type and how those, how you chose what went in there.
So with Roserock, we didn't have an option. It was already all planted. We've planted nothing ourselves at Roserock. So the 130 acres was planted to all Dijon clones. All the clones are similar there to here. The only clone they have different, and I think that was an experiment by who planted it, Atlas, a vineyard management company from California actually planted it, I think back in 2003, 2004, is 828, which we don't like. It's kind of an interesting clone. Some people like it. We'll probably end up pulling it out. But there's a little 828 there. But everything else is Dijon clone, 667, 777, 114, 115, and the same here. We used to have a little bit of Pomard on the property. We've now grafted that over. It's what we call the big field. It's kind of what I'm sitting next to. You can't really see it. But that was Pomard, but it's been grafted over. So it's own rooted, but it's grafted over to Dijon clone. Soil differences, they're both volcanic, part of 2 different basalt flows. So this is part of the Columbia basalt flow, the Dundee Hills, and that was part of the Willakaya, the Willakinsey basalt flow. And so that's a much older flow than here. And the soils there, they're both, again, volcanic, but that's a much more shallow, rocky soil. So if you were to go and dig around, and many of you have been to Roserock, if you go dig around in the property, you go 18, 20, 25 inches, you're going to start to hit big basalt rocks. Where here at Dundee Hills, the soils are much, much deeper. Sometimes you could dig down 60 inches, 70 inches before you start to see parent material. There's an exception on the east side of the property. There's a little block we call the 99 South Rock Pile. And obviously you can figure out the name of why it's called the rock pile. We started to dig in that area and it was very shallow soil. But beyond that parcel on the property, everything else is quite deep soil. So both volcanic, but different depths of soil and rock content.
Okay, Chris, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Am I muted? Let's see.
No, I can hear you.
Here. Tell me about how the 2020 vintage is shaping up.
It's 1 minute into the first quarter. I think we're up like 2 zip. And no, we're a little ahead. We've been very dry in really we need the rain. We're supposed to have a rainy weekend this upcoming weekend, and we really need the rain, which is bizarre to say in Oregon in March or April. But we've had a very wet January, okay February, very dry March, and really a very, very dry April. So we're probably 10 to 12 days ahead of historical average right now as far as growing days are concerned. So bud break was about the 8th, 9th of April. And so at this point we're a bit ahead, but not much. But it's classic Oregon. It can change on a dime. You know, it's they're saying that they're forecasting a pretty dry May as well. But as I said, I grew up in Oregon, so I'll believe when I see it. I think at some point we will make up some rain somewhere.
Okay. One little sidebar, Arron, is that you mentioned bud break was on the 9th. Normally it's about the 15th if my information is correct, right?
Correct.
So you're roughly ahead by about a week.
Yeah.
If
then we
everything,
had exactly. Go ahead.
If everything remained consistent, would you end up harvesting a week earlier as well?
There's so much variation between when you have bud break and bloom. That's really when we start to know. So bloom, if bloom holds true to be 1 week early in June, so instead of being around the 21st of June, we're around the 15th, the 14th, 13th, then yes, probably you can hedge your bets that we're going to be a week early to harvest. But that's really the key factor is when is bloom. So that's when we can start to think about buying plane tickets for Veronique and Philippe and Robert and all that. Well, we'll see. In this time and place, we'll see how all that goes. But it's a different subject. But yeah, that's when we'll know for sure. It's about 100 to 104 days from mid-bloom until you're going to harvest fruit. And again, that can vary a touch, but that's historically true, 100 to 104 days.
Okay. Deborah, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. My question kind of has to do with what you've learned from farming the Roserock site and how that has kind of informed as you've got to know the vineyard better, how that has changed or informed the winemaking as that wine has evolved.
Roserock, you don't have to push very hard as far as from just a color standpoint, a structural standpoint. What we've learned is you almost every year we do less as far as fermentation management, less punch downs, less pump overs. The wine really gains color quickly. And I think that we've learned to be very patient with it because it wants to be a more structured wine in general. Whatever block it might be, it wants to be a bit more structured. And so I think a little bit more patience and which is easy for us really because we don't push very hard in general at DDO as well. We don't have a regimen as far as, 3 punch downs a day, 2 pump overs. Veronique and I taste at 5 in the morning and we taste at 4 in the afternoon and we decide what we should do that morning or that afternoon to each fermenter. But what I do just know is that with Roserock, we do have to be even more patient than we, I think, show with the Dundee Hills property because it does want to be a structurally a bigger wine.
Okay, thank you. If we can get Mr. Hollywood Grant to take a minute before he does his, tryout for Starsky and Hutch. Grant, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Mike. Aaron, I came across an article that you did with like a panel discussion with Chapter 24 a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned how there's more vigor in Oregon, how with the growing conditions, with more vegetative growth and deeper, richer soils compared to Burgundy, where those plants are more self-regulating. Can you talk about the differences with that?
Yeah, we are, you really just answered your question. But we are just our soils are much deeper. They're much richer. We do much more devigorating here with cover crop and cover crop management than they do in Burgundy. The plants are very self-regulating. It's a much more shallow, rocky soil. Not to say there's not some deep soils in Burgundy, there are, but in general, they're much more rocky, shallow soils, and probably better draining than our soils here, which again is fine because whether it's June or January, they get some measurable rainfall. We're here in Oregon, the faucet shuts off at some point mid-May. It's going to shut off, and we're not going to have water until sometime, the end of September again. But our deeper soils give us water retention, so that helps. So it's something we do. We just naturally battle more vigor here. There's less vigor in the Roserock soil than here, but that makes sense. Their soils are more shallow, more rocky, and so the vines do just inherently have a little more struggle. And I wouldn't even call it a struggle. I would actually probably, in comparison to Burgundy, even Roserock would still probably be a vigorous vineyard in comparison to Burgundy.
Okay, thank you.
Grant, by the way, just a side note, he did a day of harvest 2019. We put him through the ringer, so it was good. So I just want to say, Grant, good job in front of colleagues. I'll admit it, you did a good job.
That was one of the most fun days I've had in I don't know how long. It was an absolute blast. Can't forget the Cheez-Its either.
Nope, secret weapon.
Filtration. Joe, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Hey, Aaron.
Hey.
Hey, we're just now releasing the 2017 DDO Chard, Roserock Chard. And from what I've read is it's a little bit more of a cooler, more classic vintage compared to the two before that were a little bit warmer. How would the 17 say compared to like 18 and 19 coming behind it? Is this a little bit of a throwback vintage it's kind of going to be a little bit of an anomaly in this run of vintages, or is 18, 19 going to be more like 17?
They'll all three be just a touch under 14%. The 19 being actually like nearly, it's about 13%, but the other 17 and 18 will be to touch under 14% alcohol. I think very similar. I like the 17. I like the 17 Chardonnay very, very much. I think Again, it shows very good acid profile, but also gains some body and some weight. We're playing, particularly with Roserock, we started when we were fermenting Roserock Chardonnay, we were kind of doing the same as DDO, half stainless steel, fermented and aged, half barrel fermented and aged, and then we would blend the two together. And it is a cooler site, Roserock, than DDO. And so we started playing with putting a little of the tank portion, the stainless steel portion of the Roserock through malolactic. And we've continued to do that. And we've actually increased how much malolactic we put that tank through. So in 17, about half the tank went through. So you could almost call the Chardonnay 3/4 malolactic. And then the other, we stopped at halfway through malo to retain some of the acid. It's the first year to note for Chardonnay. We go to the Diam closure on the Chardonnay, which to be honest, from a quality standpoint, I'm very, very happy about. I don't know that we've had a big issue in the past with it, but it is a step in quality. It is a very, very good closure. So you guys will see that or have seen it. But rest assured, we made that decision 100% based on quality. So it's very happy to be doing it. I eventually assume that the Pinot will go that way as well in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you. Hey, I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions, Aaron, and then we'll continue to move towards closure. But if you were to describe the unique similarities between DDO and Roserock, what would they be?
I think we make them. I mean, obviously, there's the basics as far as winemaking.
No,
but the vineyard itself.
The vineyard
itself. Similar elevations. I feel that the Roserock is a touch more topographically speaking. It's a little more flat. It's still on a hill, but it's not as peaks and valley as the DDO property. Again, the soils we talked about in general over the entirety of the 280 acres, more shallow soil there, more deep soil here. The Van Duzer corridor, it's a cooler site, so we don't start picking Roserock until about a week to 8 days, 10 days after we start picking DDO. So it is a cooler site by aspect of it opening. So we'll have similar daytime and nighttime temperatures, but it just cools off faster in the evening there by the winds kicking up from the coast. No, we're too far inland that we don't get the drizzle or any of that, but we do get the cooling effect.
Okay.
And so, you times that by 100 days of growing, and you have 7 to 10 days of ripening. Spacing is different. It was more conventional spacing. So they're 6x7 and we're 3x4 here. So this was at the time when this was planted in 87, 88. This would have been the most densely planted vineyard in Oregon, if not the United States, with about almost 3,100 vines to the acre. So, I get the question a lot. Well, when we do plant in the future more Roserock, will we change the spacing? Will we go to a more dense planting? It's yet to be determined. I don't know if 3,100 vines to the acre or 2,100 vines to the acre, what the right answer is. I think it depends on the site, amount of wind you have, the depth of the soil. Again, I'll talk about that a lot, but it's quite important. Roserock has a better view of the mountains, just from a aesthetic standpoint. But you can almost see 5 mountains from Roserock. You can only see 3 from DDO. So.
And then lastly, on my side, Arron, and I know you don't want to say anything negative about anybody else, but what's the unique difference between Drouhin's vineyards and everybody else's?
The spacing still is. There are more densely planted now, but spacing still is. We're going 100% organic this year, so that's something we've been working on for a number of years. If you know, Philippe Drouhin is one of the leading proponents for biodynamics in the world. We're not working towards biodynamics at this point. He's always said that he feels if we were going to do that, he'd have to be here full time. And understandably, at this point, he's not going to be. But organics is something we can work on. So for the last 8 years, we've been working we've been building every year a few more blocks. Kind of started with what we thought would be the most difficult to farm organically. And if we could do those, we felt we could kind of continue on blocks near that. So this year, we're kind of proud to announce, actually probably some of the first to know, that the entire state of DDO is going 100% organic.
Great.
Yeah.
John, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I just wanted to pick up on something you said. And hey, Arron, how you doing?
Hi, John.
Did I forget to introduce? Did I skip over introducing you by chance?
No, I think you got me.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Arron, you look good, man. Everything good?
Thanks. Thanks, you too.
I wanted to pick up on something Mike said a little bit about the similarities of the two vineyards. You had mentioned earlier that you have like a favorite plot at DDO, and a little bit kind of also picking up on what Deborah asked, as you get to learn more and more what Roserock is and what Roserock will be. Is there a place at Roserock? Is there a plot at Roserock that you're starting to find out that it's a favorite of yours, or is there one that's a surprise to you?
Yes, there's one area that's a surprise, the east side of the property, which has been nice, but hasn't gone into Zephyrin or yet until this year. Actually, we will keep some of the east blocks to go into. The property is from east to west. It's actually more elongated east to west than it is north to south, where you could say the DDO property is almost more round in from north to south, east to west, as far as just how the lay of the land. And it's broken up at Roserock into east side sections, west side sections, and the mid section, what we call it E1, E2, W1, W2, or M1, M2, et cetera, et cetera. Historically, the 7 years or 6 years, going to be 7 years of making wine from Roserock, the midsection has been the jewel. It is our musiny of the Roserock property. Texturally speaking, it's gone into Zephyrin almost every year, or at least some of it has gone in. We're very excited about this because there's still another 25 acres in the midsection to plant at some point. So that's a very exciting point to that. So the east side has surprised me. The last 2 years has been very good. The first few years, some went into Roserock, some was declassified. But the last 2 years, the east side of Roserock has been surprising. But if I had to say one block. There's a block called M8 that has every year been in Zephyrin, and that is for me the jewel. And it's funny, blind tasting. Not saying every time, but after Mallow and the wine kind of has its barrel notes and what it's going to be as a wine when it grows up, we can start to say, oh, I think it's a midsection, and I think it might be M8. And I would say at least 5 out of 10 times.
So now,
right.
now everybody's gonna be asking for M8 block. Like, I want M8 block.
Right,
Make sure I get the
know.
M8 block. Yeah.
I know. Maybe I know. We've thought about maybe that's what we'd bottle. So that's how the Roserock Louise comes about, is that we do bottle something like that separate in the future. But that's for a different conversation, a different time.
Great. Thanks, man.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add? We're right on schedule time-wise. As I said, I wanted to try to keep it to a reasonable time because I know you've all got things to take care of. But if there's something stuck in your head, feel free that we can certainly ask it.
Arron, do you get a chance to go work in Burgundy?
I do. I have gone. I've been twice. Oh, I've been many times. I go at least once a year, generally, whether it's mostly professional, but also personally, I can go in the summer if I want to holiday. But 2010, 2011 harvest, I went and did harvest there. The only complication with doing it is it has to be perfect timing. It was like, why haven't you gone more? Normally we're picking grapes around the same time. But 2010 and 2011, it was the latest vintages on record in Oregon. So Burgundy was they were normal timing. So they were 4 weeks ahead of us. So I had the ability to go and do 3 weeks of the harvest there, and then come back and repeat it here. So if that opportunity comes again, I will for sure take it up every time, if that's an option.
And was there anything crazy different?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, different sorting table, some different pieces of equipment, but from a tank standpoint, from obviously a philosophy standpoint, very, very similar. So I really, I felt like I could just be picked up and put over there, or vice versa. I mean, honestly, it made me understand the things we have here at DDO in Oregon much better, because it's literally down to the exact tanks, the same. The tile on the floor is the same, for God's sake. So it's there's some similarities there that were very, very comforting. But I see why they did it here as well.
Right.
All right. Well, I think we can kind of close it up here. I greatly appreciate it. Those are great questions. Bob,
great questions, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
And Bob has been recording all of this. He's going to put it together, and once it's done, we'll make sure that we send you all the link, and hopefully, this is helpful for your people. At some point, we're going to be back up and running full speed, and I think these things will help a great deal. I greatly appreciate you doing this in what is obviously some difficult times for all of us, but we'll get through this, and we'll come out the other end better than we went into it.
Agreed.
I agree.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys very much.
Aaron.
Everyone be well and safe. Okay, take care, and we'll see you soon at some point. So cheers.
You
Cheers.
too. Take care.
Bye, Aaron.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.